Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I hope you're all enjoying the beginning to what is hopefully a lovely, relaxing weekend. I understand that some viewers of China Update have a drinking game where they take a shot every time I say quote or unquote. That being the case, I hope you have recovered from yesterday's video. In the future, I'll try and get a better balance when it comes to using quote and unquote. Okay, for the economy, let's start with the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and then move over to the mainland. On Friday, yesterday, Hong Kong authorities announced that the city's economy is expected to expand at a rate much slower than previously expected, revising the range down to 1 to 2% for 2022, approximately half of what the previous prediction just a few months ago was, and that was about 3.5%. Authorities expressed that the economic growth forecast has been cut due to outbreaks, higher inflation rates, and geopolitical disruptions, among other factors. So basically what everyone else is facing this year. A government spokesperson expressed that in the face of mounting inflation, major central banks are expected to expedite their monetary policy tightening, further dampening global economic growth, and that, quote, the evolving global pandemic and development of China-US relations will add further uncertainties. End quote. Economists are even more pessimistic. According to a Bloomberg survey, economists downgraded their GDP forecasts for the Special Administrative Region in the second quarter, predicting a contraction of 0.4% year-on-year. For the whole year, economists surveyed predict only 1% growth for Hong Kong. In the survey, two economists also raised their inflation projections for the year by 0.2 of a percentage point to 2.3%. Now, moving from Hong Kong to the mainland, which is seeing much more devastating damage done to the economy, but unlike Hong Kong, the government has not revised down its goal of 5.5% growth for the year. We now have granular data from all sectors of the economy for the month of April in the mainland, when the Yangtze River Delta, the beating heart of China's economy, was and continues to be paralyzed. Every key industry has been hit hard, and there is no need here to go through every sector and examine every industry. A few examples, I think, paint a decent picture of the economic fallout of these lockdowns. For example, total output of all car makers across the country plunged by 46.2% to 1.2 million units in April, and it wasn't just a supply-side disaster either. Data from the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers shows that nationwide sales also plummeted by 47.1% to 1.18 million units. Industry experts say that even if all lockdowns ended tomorrow, then it wouldn't be until June at the earliest that supply chains could be repaired and operations for these automobile car factories come back up and running and start approaching full capacity. Now, factories can eventually be started up after the lockdowns are relaxed, whenever that may be. However, the massive hit to confidence, especially foreign investor confidence, will be much longer lasting. Indeed, with the recent surveys by multiple business lobby groups in China, which we've been following on China Update and which we'll look at again shortly, Chinese experts are voicing concern of an upcoming mass exodus of foreign workers, business and capital. The executive chairman of the Guangdong Society of Reform, for example, a government-backed think tank, observed yesterday on this point, quote, if any foreign investors leave because we adhere to the dynamic zero COVID measures, surely China will be worried, end quote. He Jianguo, the former head of a think tank under China's Commerce Ministry, also expressed this week, quote, to stabilize the economy, we must stabilize foreign investment. End quote. A recent survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in China showed that more than half of those surveyed had already either delayed or decreased their investments in the country. According to a survey by the German Chamber of Commerce in China released just Thursday of this week, which surveyed companies for the period May 6th through 8th, 28% of the foreign employees of the companies surveyed were planning to leave China before or upon the expiration of their current contracts, almost 1/3. However, as we know, all of these challenges come not from poor economic policy, but political policy. And with that, let's end this part on the Chinese economy with some excerpts from a widely shared article by former Australian Prime Minister and sinologist Kevin Rudd. Quote, "The economic problem rests with Mr. Xi and his pivot to the state. He unleashed the crackdown on the property and tech sectors. He described these decisions as part of an overall policy framework that has moved Chinese economic policy well to the ideological left. Mr. Xi has begun strangling the goose that, for 35 years, has lain the golden egg. The big problem is whether Mr. Xi has gotten China's underlying policy direction badly wrong, and if so, if he is willing and able to change course. If not, the world may enter an even more dangerous phase if Mr. Xi turns to nationalism and greater foreign policy exertion to reinforce his domestic political legitimacy in the face of a slowing Chinese economy." End quote. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content, you're getting some value from the video, don't forget to hit the like button. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help keep this channel sustainable, or just to give a one-off tip, Patreon, buy me a coffee, and crypto links are in the description below. Next up, recently the Forum of 30 on China's international finance and the development of international studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, very long title but a very important institute in Beijing, hosted an internal video seminar to discuss the Ukraine war and its impact on China and how China should respond. Now, we've spent a lot of time in the past discussing the official policy or the official position of Beijing vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine and the crisis in Eastern Europe with the Russian invasion. We've discussed this in previous episodes, but here we have something a little bit different. Former Chinese ambassador to Ukraine, Gao Yusheng, spoke at the seminar. However, while the former ambassador's comments are very much from a Chinese perspective, they are not in line with the official party position on the war, and was soon after censored online. Now, while Mr. Gao likely has very little influence in the People's Republic of China in terms of policy, his comments may reflect the contrarian views of some policymakers within the government and some academics at the highly influential Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. His now censored comments thus give us some insight into the more nuanced views of some policymakers in relation to how Beijing should view and respond to the Ukraine war. This also reminds us, as we look at this, that there are thoughtful experts and officials behind the scenes that do not always agree with the official line. Link to the full translation of the comments is in the description below. Because this is from a presentation, a direct quote is somewhat awkward, so let's walk through parts of his presentation and make direct, though edited, quotes when necessary. The first point that Mr. Gao makes is that 1. China's position in the Russia-Ukraine war has become increasingly passive and unfavorable, to use his language. Its coming defeat is already clear, Mr. Gao argues, and he makes 5 points. Russia has been declining ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Secondly, the failure of the Russian blitzkrieg and the failure to achieve a quick victory signaled the beginning of the Russian defeat. The third point, Russian military and economic advantages over Ukraine have been offset by the resilience of Ukraine and the huge, sustained and effective aid, to use his words, provided to Ukraine. Fourth point, modern wars are necessarily hybrid wars covering military, economic, political, diplomatic, public opinion, propaganda, intelligence and information. Russia is not only in a passive position on the battlefield, but is lost in other areas. And 5, Russia can no longer decide when and how the war will end. Russia is trying to end the war as soon as possible so it can hold on to what it has gained. This has failed, he argues. In this sense, Russia has lost its strategic leadership and initiative. So we can see here these points are very different, radically different to the official statements that we have seen coming out of Beijing over the last several weeks and months. Mr. Gao moves on to argue that the next phase of the war is likely to be more violent and intense. This is because the objectives of the two sides are diametrically opposed. Ensuring its sovereignty over Crimea and eastern Ukraine is clearly the bottom line for the Russian side, he argues. Ukraine will not concede to Russia on the issue of sovereignty and territorial integrity and will be determined to recover eastern Ukraine and Crimea through the war. The US, NATO and the EU, he argues, have already repeatedly affirmed their determination to defeat Putin. Mr. Gao concludes by discussing possible points of evolution of the international order after the Russo-Ukrainian War. And these points are particularly important when it comes to what it means for China and East Asia. 1. Russia's political, economic, military and diplomatic power will be significantly weakened and isolated. 2. Ukraine would be removed from Russia's orbit and sphere of influence and become a member of the great European family, that is, a member of the European Union. 3. Other former Soviet states may experience new and different degrees of de-Russianization. Some countries will move more actively to strengthen their ties with the West. This will all have a tremendous effect on Beijing's own calculus. And what is particularly important from China's perspective, 4, quote, Japan and Germany, while completely free from the constraints of the defeated countries of World War II and accelerating their armament development, will more actively strive for the status of political powers. However, they will not break away from the democratic camp, nor will they completely abandon the policy of peaceful development. And he continues with point 5, the US and other countries will push hard for substantive reform of the United Nations and other important international organizations. If they are blocked, they may also start a new one. Both may exclude some countries, such as Russia, by drawing ideological lines of so-called independence. End quote.